Hi, perhaps you recognize me. It's your favorite president.
We will decide who comes to this country and the circumstances in which they come.
You know you want to ban our national flags, but we're going to wave you goodbye.
What does confrontational mean? It means you fight for what you believe.
Enough was enough! And I said, let Trumpomania run wild, brother!
It is not merely our privilege to be strong, it is our duty to be strong.
G'day everyone, welcome back to another episode of Commanding the Narrative. My name is Stephen Tripp, joined by the lovely Rosemary Marshall. How are you today, Rosemary?
Very well, thank you, Stephen. Thank you for having me on again.
No, it's my pleasure. I love having you on. We're going to be talking about Rosemary and Forest of the Fallen and everything that she's been up and doing lately. She's a very busy lady. I don't know how you keep up with everything.
Get up to a lot of mischief.
That's correct.
For an old bat, I do.
So quickly, I'll just jump in and let everyone know how you can support us. If you want to go to Buy Me a Coffee and throw us a few dollars there, it helps to pay for the stream, helps to pay for the website, and also, most importantly, gives me a very warm and fuzzy feeling inside. So if you would like to head and to Buy Me a Coffee, that would be much appreciated. But some people lately have been saying to me, Stephen, not so thrilled about Buy Me a Coffee, would like some other options. So now you can. Please head to commandingthenarrative.com and hit the donate button at the top, and you'll come to this page. It has some other options there, how you can donate to us directly if you would like to. It is much appreciated, as I said. And while you are at commandingthenarrative.com, please hit the sign up button. It's on the main page in the top right hand corner. If you click that and sign up, you'll get a weekly newsletter from me. So you'll be able to keep up to date with all the podcasts that we do, any articles that I might write. And I was actually published in the Spectator Australia only yesterday. So that'll all be there, and also events coming up. And if we scroll down, I'll just let you know about an event that's happening in the Northern Beaches on Sunday. It's called the Freedom Family Celebration. Doug Rennie is organising this event. It's on Sunday, December 15th, between 2:30 and 5 p.m. at the Newport Bowling Club. He wants a big turnout there. Doug's a great guy. He's doing a lot of work behind the scenes. So if you would like to come along to this, please do so, and we would love to see you there. So all that information is on commandingthenarrative.com, so please hit the sign up button and you'll get up to date with everything that we're doing. But let's get up to date with what you're doing, Rosemary.
Well, before we do, I'd like to say I'll be at that family celebration with my husband and my friends. A lot of Forest of the Fallen supporters will be there.
Yep.
So I think it'll be a party. I think it'll be fun. And I think you'll meet a lot of like-minded people who are actually doing something to try and get us out of this frightful mess we find ourselves in.
Well, if you want to come and meet Rosemary, join us on Sunday, and that's the place to be. But what have you been? We interviewed you a while ago, a few months ago.
I think you were one of my first podcasts ever.
Yeah.
Since then, I've done a couple more. I've been in England twice. I've done some podcasts there, and I'm about to do another podcast for UK Column News, which will be interesting, with Ben Rubin, who's a very interesting man. UK Column News is a great source of truth with what's happening in Europe. If you're interested in the Middle East and in the Ukraine, you'll find the truth there.
Yep.
Anyway, back to what's happening here, because I'm far more interested in what's happening in Australia. We've had two very heroic women, being Melissa McCann and Trinh, both facing the ordeal of going to court. Federal court for Melissa on the 5th of December. I don't know Melissa as well as I know Lee, but I went to court there to support her and met some amazing people, including Sharon Cousins, who's the person who's produced Open Dane. Everyone should be looking at Open Dane. That's the adverse events recording place where they make it very difficult to find out what's going on. But because Sharon has got a new system of showing what's happening, that is a good resource. But it was a disappointing day for all of us that day. And Melissa McCann she was very hopeful that her case was immutable, that they couldn't get out of it. But the one thing you do learn as you go to court is they find a way.
Yeah.
Anyway, she had a rather poor representation herself, and the other side had a rapacious woman who was just taking no prisoners. But one of the more interesting things that came out of that event was that the the TGA lawyer said the TGA has no duty of care to Australians. So
What?
I wonder why we got it. And interestingly, Sharon Cousins, who's an absolute...
Why does it exist if it has no duty of care?
Exactly. Well, they do like collecting the money, because apparently they got $45 million from AstraZeneca, Pfizer and Moderna in the years between 2020 and 2023. $43 million. I'm sure that's a coincidence, though, aren't you?
Oh.
Anyway, so no duty of care. And then the question was asked, well, who is responsible for the duty of care? And this is something I've been saying for the last 4 years, because I've listened to Elizabeth Hart.
Sorry, just quickly. So this is the TGA website, Therapeutic Goods Administration. We are Australia's government authority, responsible for evaluating, assessing and monitoring products that are defined as therapeutic goods. We regulate medicines, medical devices and biologicals to help Australians stay safe, stay healthy and safe, but they don't have a duty of care.
No, because they have some sort of Commonwealth immunity, but they don't tell you about that when they give you all these instructions willy-nilly. But what did come out was the people who are responsible are the people holding the needle. So they've passed the buck.
Which is what you've been saying.
I've been saying it because Elizabeth Hart, that wonderful woman in South Australia, she sent me all the paperwork. She said, this is what I've got from the powers that be, who make it quite clear that unless you get proper and full informed consent, and that by that she means you have to be able to tell the person what alternative remedies there are. You have to say exactly what the poor outcomes might be. And you have to make it very clear and understood that they know all of that before they take an injection. Anyway, the TGA woman, the barrister, said, yes, that's the case.
I was going to play this later, but we might jump to it now. So you've been going into pharmacies throughout the Northern Beaches. You've even been in the UK, which I've got a clip of you going to a pharmacy in the UK, and you've been going up to them and saying, hey, you have a duty of care with these injections.
They are true believers. They think that they're doing the right thing. And look, one thing I've learned over the last 4 or 5 years is that one of the most dangerous things you can ever allow yourself to be drawn into is a herd mentality. Once something becomes common wisdom is when you ought to start questioning it. And these pharmacists look at everything and say, well, everyone else is doing it. It must be okay. It's not. And it's anything that's a herd mentality, I implore everyone to think about it. Because as soon as it becomes that, it means that no one's questioning it. And the last 4 years, the more information I learn about Big Pharma, the more shocking, and I mean truly shocking it is, that they've managed to do the biggest con job on humanity that has ever been done. I mean, I've just never seen anything like it.
So this is the clip from the UK. We'll play this. This is probably not one of the better ones, but it's just
I was being polite that day. It was my sister's pharmacy down in Budleigh, Salterton.
Yeah.
I would come in with me probably. Hello.
Hi, you all right?
Yeah, are you the pharmacist?
No. Would you like some advice today from the pharmacist?
Well, I noticed you're pushing the COVID and flu vaccines.
Oh, yes.
We've had terrible problems in Australia with them. I was just interested to know if you're finding the same thing here.
No, we do walk-ins. If you
I don't want one. No,
okay.
no, I've got friends who've been nearly killed by them. Aren't you hearing that? Aren't you hearing about the adverse events that are happening?
No.
How sad.
No.
Just in Australia the other day, they had a meeting at Port Hedland, which is a council in Western Australia, where they finally said these have to be stopped because it's killed so many people.
Wow.
7 times as many people are dying from the injections. And it's from the injections, particularly the Aboriginal community.
Gosh.
It's 7 times as many people are dying. You might want to look into it because there's going to be a liability issue at some point, and informed consent hasn't been given. And for that reason, whoever's injecting them is going to be liable.
No.
You need to look into it.
Yeah, I'll pass it on. Yeah.
Thank you so
means.
much.
Yeah.
Bye-bye. She was interested, wasn't she?
She just wanted to put her head in the sand, I think. But this liability issue, how How significant is it, do you think?
Well, I wouldn't want to be them. In fact, a friend sent me a video this morning of about a man who'd made contact with one of the health. He'd made contact for advice, I think, from a pharmaceutical board, saying, I'm a little bit nervous now. Since that man was killed, the health authority man, the man responsible for that health fund, was shot in the back of the head in America.
Yeah.
Well, it's made a lot of people a bit nervous because this particular pharmacist had realized that he'd jabbed half his community. He lived in a small town in America. He said, I'm a little bit nervous about someone coming and wanting to shoot me in case they had a bad reaction. And the response was, yes, you'd better move probably.
Wow.
I think this is starting to dawn on some people. But yesterday in court, I was sitting next to Dr. Fidge.
Sorry, I'm just going to fix the video. You keep going.
Dr. Fidge was, do I keep talking?
Yeah.
I
don't know why this does this.
Yes, who's crossed swords with the court and had Julian Gillespie representing him until they found the judge had colluded with Big Pharma. So anyway, he was saying to me, with his knowledge of the pharmaceutical industry, that so many are still believers. So we're in a very strange place. And my Lee's court case really highlighted exactly how terrible it's been for her. She's had 29 years of experience, both in Australia and in Cambodia, and still she's been put through the mill. This is a person who at the age of 5 had her mother murdered by the Khmer Rouge. She then was sent to Vietnam to be with her aunt, and I think 2 of her sisters went with her. So as basically an orphan, she went to Vietnam, and unfortunately the aunt she went to ran a sweatshop for clothing manufacturer, and she was basically made to work in the sweatshop as a little girl. So by the time she was 11 or 12, they jumped on a boat and came to Australia, where she found herself unable to speak English, going to school that she couldn't really adapt to easily because she obviously had no language. She had to learn English, and then she had to work really hard in order to get into a position where she could study medicine. And she's the person who should be Australian of the Year, who we are punishing like this. It's just the most terrible thing.
Sorry, everyone. We're having a few issues with the camera again. I don't know why this is happening. Just give me a second. We'll try and get it restarted. But tell us a little bit more about the court case with Miley Trinh,
Right.
because you've been there
I was
the last
there every
few days.
day.
Yeah.
I went on Monday, and it was intimidating. On the first day was a man called Alan Robert Glanville. He is someone who apparently is held in high regard in the transplant business. He works at St. Vincent's and also at Macquarie, I believe. Anyway, he gave an account of himself, and then he launched into what he thought about Mai Lee and the treatment that Mai Lee had administered to patient A. And just as a way of background to patient A, bear in mind I have neither legal or medical experience, but as a layperson I was fascinated with all of this, and so I did my best to take it all in. Patient A was a lady who was Muslim, and she was fully robed. So her vitamin D was very diminished, and she found herself with COVID. She lived in the western suburbs, and she adamantly didn't want to go to hospital, to ICU. She was scared. She felt she'd have no one speaking for her, which she wouldn't have because it was in lockdown. So she wanted to stay at home. And Mai Lee, although Mai Lee encouraged her to go to ICU, because she refused, Mai Lee wasn't going to let her die. I mean, I just have so much admiration for Mai Lee.
Yeah.
She's one of the most remarkable people I've ever met. Anyway, the story continues with this woman. Her oxygen dropped down to 70, which apparently is when things are very dangerous. And Mai Lee got her onto what she described as a small domestic oxygen pump, which helped a little bit, but this woman was still in danger. So she got the larger pump, which increased by double the oxygen the woman was getting. And even with that, it still wasn't sufficient. So following the FLCCC protocol, Mai Lee gave this woman 500 milligrams of prednisone. Prednisone's a what is it? It's a steroid.
Yeah, okay.
Steroid.
Yep.
And a lot of people are prescribed this, but usually in small doses. And the protocol in the hospitals at the time, although this was unknown to My Lee, was only 6 millimeters. What is it?
Milligrams?
Yes, milligrams. Sorry, yeah. As I say, I'm not medical.
Yeah.
A very, 6 of whatever it is, it's a tiny amount.
Yeah.
And the reality is, in hindsight, we all know now that wouldn't have touched the sides. So the protocol that Pierre Corey advised from the FLCCC was 500, which of course sounds radical. But since this all happened, I was speaking to a friend of mine just yesterday, and her husband, who's got an autoimmune problem, when he has one of these sort of storms that happen every now and then, he's put on 200. So it's not unusual. But in her case, in this lady's case, she was really in absolute danger of dying. But what I found most distressing was, although the court was supposed to be non-adversarial, it was very adversarial.
Of course.
The way it was set up, there was the judge sitting at the top of this sort of 2-tiered desk arrangement. On his left was, I believe, a woman from the public. She didn't say anything. And below them were 2 GPs, both of whom were adversarial and, in fact, quite insulting. They were determined, between them and the barrister for the other side, they were determined to make My Lee say, I thought my treatment was better than what this lady would get in the ICU. Professor Glanville was
So if she had said that, what was the issue with that?
Well, they just would have said, you should have followed the guidelines. How dare you be so egotistical? They were pushing and pushing and pushing. They asked her every which way. And My Lee remained very calm. She did get very upset at one stage because they were so brutal. But this Alan Glanville, again, I repeat, he'd never seen a COVID patient. But he was, when I say aggressively, he was assertively saying that there was no way anyone should be giving 500 milligrams.
I just get sick of hearing these stories about these people in these authority positions who have no experience whatsoever in their field, and they're just trying to, push down people that have competence, and I mean it's throughout the whole system. It's not just the medical system; it's everywhere. People that are just, you wouldn't survive in the private world, the real world. They're just living in the bureaucracy, and they're just trying to. They just adhere totally to what they're told. Actually, there was an absolutely beautiful moment when one of the more aggressive doctors, very unpleasant woman, she said to My Lee, "Why didn't you follow the guidelines?" And My Lee, in her lovely quiet voice, said, "Because I trusted my judgment." She said, "You trusted your judgment? I'd never trust my judgment." It was an absolute. Shouldn't a doctor trust their judgment?
Well, you would think so. This woman was dying, and then we raked over the fact that this woman was able to get up and go to the loo and talk. And Miley said, "Yes, well, COVID patients often do present like that." And it came out later with Pierre Corey that when you have COVID, you have a dry lung. Whereas if you have pneumonia, which I speak of experience, I've had it 3 times because of a flu vaccine, it's a wet lung and it presents differently. So you're in far more danger with a dry lung because people aren't aware of how low your oxygen level is. And this woman's oxygen level was dangerously low.
Yeah.
So,
but she survived. She didn't die. But this is not a murder case or anything like that. She got better. This
is a witch hunt. That's what this is. Anyway, so we went through all this over prednisone, and it was horrible watching what she went through. And Philip Altman came on after that, Dr. Altman.
Yeah, we've interviewed Dr. Altman before, yeah.
One of the most wonderful people who has fought and fought and fought for truth. He just said, I loved it. He said, I'm baffled. I'm baffled that, of course, everyone's baffled in the medical, always saying he's baffled. He doesn't know why everyone's dropping dead. But Dr. Altman is baffled because there's so much evidence of the efficacy of ivermectin, and how people are in denial still is just beyond him. And and of course the question was asked of him, why do you think that ivermectin hasn't been used? And he said, well, I think it's a government, it's become political. And one of these rude doctors said, so you believe in conspiracy theories, do you? And then she said, I think you believe in unicorns if you think that the whole world was in lockstep. I mean, honestly, she was so rude. Anyway, her moment came.
Hold on.
Her moment came. Rather delicious, actually.
But I just want to go back to so they said you believe in unicorns if you believe the world was in lockstep. But it was. Every country acted exactly the same way.
Yeah, you believe in unicorns if you think there was a conspiracy not to help people, and that what the advice they were giving us wasn't for the best. You believe in unicorns. And the vaccine, of course, was the saving thing. Anyway.
Look, that's just so easy to say. It doesn't provide any evidence, nothing like that. It just this conspiracy theory term is so effective because it's just like all the other ones out there, anti-vaxxer, cooker.
Well,
it just puts you in a little box and tells you to shut up while you're in that box.
It distilled down to the fact that there have been 300 trials for ivermectin, 2 of which weren't run in the right fashion, and so they were discredited. So these people hang their entire decision on those 2 trials. No one mentions the fact of the Pfizer trials. That unfortunate business is just swept under the rug. That was only, they say it was on 44,000 people, but I believe it was only, I actually can't remember the number, but not very many.
Yeah.
According to...
Well, Greg Hunt came out at the time and said something to the words to the effect that the vaccine rollout was the world's largest medical trial.
Yeah.
So it's okay for them to push on the public experimental product, but Trinh, who's also looking for the best method based on her years of experience and trusting her judgment, apparently that's not
No, you're not allowed to do that.
No,
you just do what the government tells you, even though they're saying give them 6 millilitres of this. Actually, apparently that's what's used for skin rashes, so that would have done well.
So you've been in court all this time watching this whole case play out. Had you been to many court cases before this? Like,
no.
What was your impression of the court itself?
Adversarial,
yeah,
no question, and also quite desperate.
Yeah.
And constantly the judge was telling us to be quiet because we kept laughing because some of it really was quite funny. They looked very foolish at different moments, but and also there was a bit of snorting at the ridiculousness of the accusations they were making to Miley. She was quite intimidated for the first 3 days, but it was absolutely wonderful because she came out on Thursday like a little lioness, and she was not going to give an inch. But in the intervening time, so we had Dr. Glanville, then we had Dr. Altman, and then the third day she was under the pump all day. And that day I only could stay in the morning because I had the pleasure of meeting with our MP from Mackellar, Sophie Scamps, that afternoon.
Let's talk about that in a minute.
So I missed that afternoon, but apparently she was quite brutally treated. And so back on Thursday, and she had lined up, I felt like the cavalry was coming. We had Pierre Corey and Professor Clancy and Dr. Julian Fidge and Dr. Pridgeon. I don't know Dr. Pridgeon, but I met Dr. Fidge. And of course, I think most people in our movement know both Pierre Corey and Professor Clancy. Well, Pierre Corey, he came off, it was a very tricky start because he does so much of this, and obviously he'd cut and paste quite a bit. And they made a big thing of the fact that he'd had several certifications of boards struck off. They made a big thing of that he'd unfortunately not removed them because it only happened 8 weeks before, and he just obviously didn't notice. And it was 9 o'clock at night for him. He'd obviously been treating patients all day, and he did seem very tired. But after the initial beating up of him over his so-called indiscretions with his cut and paste, he rose to the occasion and he vindicated. I mean, he obviously hadn't heard what Miley had said, but he said, our advice is to give 500, a huge amount of steroid, because if you don't, the patient their lungs just cannot cope and they die. So he vindicated everything she did, and then he got onto ivermectin and gave a very good account of that. I mean, I can't remember exactly what he said, but he made it very clear that it was saving lives. And in fact, just the other day, RFK Jr. was speaking, and he said the FDA in America, they've now acknowledged that there was no reason why they shouldn't have let people have ivermectin. Funny that, isn't it?
Now, I've got the link in the chat to StreamYard if anyone wants to call in and contribute today and ask Rosie a question or make a comment or maybe even give one of your personal experiences of this whole period. But Miley Trinh, obviously you said she was in a very adversarial environment. She's up against it. No one wants to have to go to court at any stage of their life. But she's looking in the audience and there's people like yourself and others supporting her. Did you get a chance to speak to her?
Oh, yes.
And
we had lunch every day.
Yeah. How did she feel about the support that she was getting from just
Grateful.
everyday people?
Grateful. Look, I can't begin to say how much we all admire her, all of us. And it was a real privilege to be there with her. Anyway, after yesterday, well, let me get to the really good part. Professor Clancy came charging in, and he only had half an hour, of course, because by this time they'd wasted so much time. The court closes at 4 o'clock. I mean, they only do about 2 hours work, these people. And he was only called at 3:30. He just came in and said, it's corruption, basically. He actually said, I've written it here. He said, the rule of science and the doctor-patient relationship, which are the main tenets of being a doctor, were completely ignored for money. So there was your conspiracy theory, absolutely shot to pieces. He said big pharma interfered with government to the point where no one would speak up, and he didn't say, these are my interpretation, we were basically stuck with this faulty vaccine when ivermectin has been shown over and over again to be totally efficacious, and it was completely wrong that people weren't allowed to have it and they were forced into this.
Obviously, the fallout of this whole period is that there have been people that have had adverse reactions to these shots. You're really on the front line of it because you're doing these Forest of the Fallen presentations on the beaches of the northern beaches. If people don't know what the Forest of the Fallen is, I'm sure you probably are aware of it. This is an example of one of the presentations that Rosie puts out most weekends, right?
Every weekend.
Every weekend.
We're back at Balmoral Beach in North Sydney, northern beaches of Sydney. It's a beautiful day. We're with Forest of the Fallen. Yesterday, I attended what was meant to be a casual discussion organised by our federal member from Mackellar. It was interesting to hear what so many people there still believe in the vaccines. And of course, we're considered anti-vaxxers, but they still believe the narrative of the safe and effective mantra. One person who in fact attended a Forest of the Fallen at Avalon about a year ago continued with his argument that we, in our ignorance, are simply cherry-picking to make an argument. This man says he's a biologist. I asked him if he'd ever heard of Professor Angus Dalgleish or Dr. Philip Altman or the Australian medical professionals. He'd never heard of any of them. So many are simply not prepared to even look. And until they do, we are stuck in this dreadful situation where the injured are simply not believed and are told they have depression and anxiety. The medical profession refuses to listen, and pregnant women are still being vaccinated. In the UK, they've finally admitted that getting vaccinated with this poison is not advisable for pregnant women. So let's hope that that happens in Australia as well.
So I guess the thing that sticks out for me with these Forest of the Fallens that you do is that this is not a display of anti-vaxxers. These are people that took the vaccine and then got hurt by it.
We're called anti-vaxxers, though.
But you're still called anti-vaxxers.
Oh, my response is shame they weren't. They wouldn't be dead and dying, would they?
Yeah.
Wish they'd had been.
So how long have you been doing this now, the Forest of the Fallen?
About 18 months, I think it is now.
And have you noticed, so obviously you're dealing with the general public. That's the whole point of it. Have you noticed that the mood has been changing?
Yeah, the mood has changed. People more often than not come and say thank you and tell you something awful that's happened to them or their family. I wish these people who keep telling us these vaccines are safe and effective could spend some time at the forest. I had a very distressing time on Wednesday afternoon meeting up with Sophie Scamps. She's she's a Teal MP for the Northern Beaches, Mackellar. Yeah. And, she's a doctor and she's a mother. And I've had several interludes meeting with her. She actually turned up at Newport and I spoke with her for an hour. I told her a lot of the stories. I told her my personal story of a vaccine injury in my family. I talked about Andrew Wakefield. She was very interested in all this. And she said, oh, yes, she's very good at saying something needs to be done. And she gave me, in effect, 45 minutes of her time on Wednesday, but I really felt like I achieved nothing. I had wanted to bring with me two mothers, Paula and Shona, whose children are on the cusp of exciting times in their lives. Connor was 23 and Brittany was only 19 when they were both injected with Pfizer. Both of them ended up in hospital with severe heart problems. And
Sophie Scamps is a doctor.
I know, I can't understand it. Anyway, I don't know whether this is I don't understand. I'm only saying what she said to me. She said that the vaccines have been a success and they've saved lots of lives. She said that she does know that people have been vaccine injured, and she does believe that the vaccine injury program should be extended. And she's working with someone called Nick Wood, who I think is a unicorn because he's acknowledging the fact that people are vaccine injured, but he doesn't want to stop the vaccine. I mean, that is completely beyond my understanding how anyone could say, oh, yes, well, there are a lot of people getting hurt, but we must keep having these vaccinations. She also said, I pointed a few things out to her. I said, look, we've got 107 or nearly 108,000 excess deaths in Australia since the vaccine rollout. Do you think that might be something to do with the vaccine by any chance? No, that's COVID. And I said, well, that's interesting.
COVID is causing the excess deaths.
Yeah. And I said, well, that's
despite the fact that before the vaccines, I think the death rate was like 0 point something.
Well, it was a very stable death rate. And I think it was about 92,000 that we had most years, which apparently was quite normal. Anyway, I said, well, how do you account for the year 2022 when 38,000 more people died? The year of the vaccine rollout for the booster, how do you account for that? Oh, they died of COVID. And I said, but they would have had 2 vaccines by then. So how does that work out? And I also pointed out that there's been this big cover-up that you're not vaccinated for 2 weeks after your jab. And that's really convenient because 52% of the people who die from the vaccination die within the first 20 days. Isn't that lucky that they can just pretend they're unvaccinated? They can put down 52% of the over 1,000 people who died. Oh, they weren't vaccinated. Because it wasn't valid for the first 2 weeks.
Wow.
So
same with the excess deaths. So the excess deaths were going, 15% higher than normal, whatever it was, and then I think it was the 3rd year or so. They said, oh no, we're going to base it on the previous year.
Yes, isn't that nice when it was high?
Yeah. So it's still high, but it does, it doesn't have that headline now that it's 15% higher than normal.
Meanwhile, every time I poke my nose out into Pittwater Road, I don't think I go out ever without seeing another ambulance. Every time I go out, I see ambulance. And they're bewildered by why there's so much sepsis. I mean, we never heard of sepsis. I know lots of people who've had sepsis. It's very, very unusual.
See, this is the thing. We focus on the excess deaths, but there's a lot of people that have had adverse reactions who may be just suffering in silence. I mean,
well, a couple of very interesting interludes at the Forest. I think I was at DY, and this couple came up to me, and the wife was pretty savvy. She said, oh, look, my husband had a stroke from the vaccine. And I looked at him, I said, oh, do you think it was? And he said, no, I had a stroke. I don't think it was a vaccine. She said it was. It was just after one of the injections. Anyway, I said, well, have you looked at some of the flags here of all the people who've had strokes? Anyway, he came back and he actually did an interview with me after, looking around, and his wife was obviously in his ear saying, this is like you. This is what happened to you. So he came back and he did an interview and he said, yeah, my stroke was from the vaccine. I hear so many.
There was a clip that I was going to play. We're not going to play it now, but you were interviewing a gentleman, a young guy, and he was talking about how 2 of his friends who were 35 died from heart attacks.
From heart attacks, and they were both. I mean, he was I'd say he was about 38 or 9, and his friends were in the fitness industry. And
when I was growing up, if that happened once, it would be a huge thing. He's had 2 friends that have had that happen. So in his small circle, his group, that's happened.
And he said that so many of his friends have autistic children. That's another subject.
Yeah. But just
I do have to speak about that in a minute, though.
Yes, no, we definitely want. I mean, there's a lot we've got to talk about on with all of this. I mean, it's such a huge thing. I just want to finish off with Sophie. In credit to her, she did give her time to speak with you.
She was badgered into it because what happened at the kitchen tea, which I mentioned in that, I don't know if you know Franco. Franco Tedesco. He's a big freedom fighting person. He was at that, and he filmed her speaking with me, which she was very unhappy about. And she was really sort of pushed. She basically said, "Oh, well, I would like to speak with you." Because every time I've seen her, she said, "I would like to speak with you." So she said it again. And I said, "All right, well, I'll email you after on Monday." So I emailed her on Monday, and I was hoping I could bring Dr. Altman with me, but I'm very glad I didn't because it would have wasted his time. But I did say to her, I've got 2 mothers whose children have been badly injured, and I'd really like to bring them. She said, no. She put it, I just want to meet with you and we'll have a one-to-one conversation. I'm thinking, yeah, no witnesses, that's right. So I invited those 2 mothers to come and wait outside, and that after I had my conversation with Sophie, I would share with them what Sophie had said to me, because one of them had spent a lot of time explaining to Sophie what had happened to Brittany. So none of this was news, but of course, every time you speak with Sophie, she acts like she's never heard any of this before. So as far as that mother's concerned, Sophie is completely up to speed with everything that's going on. But the way she was with me was, oh, yes, I'm very sympathetic. On the other line she said was, I really want to get the data from this. And I said, well, how are you going to do that? She said, I'm going to make contact with the cardiologists who are seeing the people, and I'm going to get the data from them and find out what's going on. And I said, well, good luck with that, because they won't admit to having any issue with, because they'll lose their license. So I just thought, look, she whacked a Band-Aid on me and sent me on my way.
Did you feel she was being genuine?
No.
And how did you feel when you walked out?
I had to think about it all again, because when you're in front of someone who's full of smiles and very sweet, and you know she's got this manner that she's practiced, and you could almost feel like she's sincere, but when you listen to the words she's saying, you realize that this is just a spiel she's got. But that really would be my summary. We weren't rude to each other. She was very polite to me, and she gave me her time, but I'm in her constituency. I expect nothing less.
Yeah.
And I do take great exception to the fact that she's been approached by the other, one mother in particular, but she's not the only one. And none of us have had any recognition of what is really happening. And there's just no denying it. We are we've got real trouble happening now.
So these were the 2 ladies that you spoke to. So this was afterwards, was it?
Yeah, we had a coffee together, and I shared with them what I'd been told.
Okay, so who's this lady here?
Paula is Connor's mother, and Connor has had 2 Pfizers. He was running 10,000 meters every day, and now he can't walk up the stairs to his bedroom.
I've met Connor.
He's a great guy.
Let's play this one.
With Paula, whose son Connor was vaccine injured, and I've just visited Sophie Scamps, who tells me that the cardiologists are the people she wants to listen to. What's your experience with cardiologists like when Connor's heart problems started up?
Oh, goodness. Well, the first cardiologist said it was all in his head. The second cardiologist said, just jump on the treadmill and you'll get over it. He couldn't walk 3 steps at a time. So our faith in cardiologists, well, I guess that answers.
Hang on, I have to pause that. So he's having heart issues. He can't walk up the stairs, and the cardiologist says, "Jump on the treadmill." Isn't that the worst advice?
Absolutely.
And Miley Trin's in court for prescribing ivermectin.
Saving a life, yeah. And this cardiologist could well have killed Connor if he followed that nonsense.
Okay, let's keep going.
Do you think there'll be many cardiologists prepared to speak up to give the statistics to Sophie?
I think so many specialists are tied, or their hands are tied. We know that. They know that. So will they speak out? That's a very good question. I'd like to think so. I think the dam is breaking bit by bit. There's cracks, but
and Connor has a medical debt of 120,000 plus now. Is he getting any help and any recognition?
Absolutely not. No, nobody wants to open their door.
I get the feeling, having spoken with Sophie, that she's not very up to date with the latest findings. And all she's listening to is mainstream media and something called Converse, which is run by Nick Woods, who still is promoting these injections. So I'm not quite sure how the cards are going to fall, but I don't think they're going to be in her favour somehow. That's
just watching this mother. I mean, no parent wants to see their child hurt or injured or anything like that. It must be devastating for this poor woman.
I can't begin to tell you the tragedies that you hear about. People think, oh, myocarditis is mild. No, it's not. And you don't recover from it. I mean, thankfully, some people do. But in the meantime, everyone worries night and day about their children. Connor has great difficulty finding a job he can do because he can't exert himself. He's exhausted.
Yeah.
Brittany is traumatized. Well, the trauma started the night she had the vaccine, and she went to the Northern Beaches Hospital, and they said, oh, you're anxious. Well, if you're having a heart attack, you would be anxious.
Is this Brittany here?
That's Brittany.
Maybe let's hear.
She's very, very stoic and doesn't like to act like she feels like a victim. But that girl, despite her bright appearance, is suffering more than anyone Connor is suffering equally.
Yeah.
Hi, my name's Brittany. When I was 19, so 3 years ago now, I got forced to have the Pfizer vaccine. Within 6 hours, I had severe agonizing chest pain, and eventually I was diagnosed with myopericarditis. I've suffered with palpitations, tachycardia, arrhythmia, POTS every single day for the past 3 years, and it's been an absolute nightmare. I've had to put all my life plans on hold, and all of the doctors are acknowledging my problems, and it's just not spoken about enough. But yeah, my whole life is completely different now from what it should have been. And you should come and support Rosie on Tuesday night at, is it DY Council?
It's at the Northern Beaches Council.
Northern Beaches Council, yeah. We should be speaking on behalf of all of us vaccine injured, which is amazing. So come and support. That would be amazing.
Thank you so much, Brittany. Thank you. What a gorgeous girl she is.
She is gorgeous. And look, if you were walking down the beaches like we do every day, and you would see her, you wouldn't assume anything. You would think, okay, well, there's a healthy young girl, but speaking to her, she's really suffering.
Well, the strange thing about this is, and Ellie Sutton's another one, these beautiful young women, and I'm not saying that in that can't, everyone says everyone's beautiful. These women are beautiful. They look well. They don't look as though they're suffering. I don't know how that happens, but they are. And the pain they're going through and their families and the upheavals. Ellie's got 2 small kids. I don't know how she copes. I don't know how the family copes. I don't know how Paula and Shona cope with the anger they must feel. These kids can't work. Little Brittany had PTSD because after her incident at the Northern Beaches Hospital, she staggered out and she basically collapsed into the gutter outside the hospital because they wouldn't admit her, because they said it was in her head. And she rang her mother and said, come and get me.
Wow.
I can't imagine how they all got over that. But they're very strong and they continue to fight. And that family's in debt by more than $250,000 over Brittany's expenses. And she's only just got the answers. So she is due for compensation. I'd be amazed if she gets the full compensation, because not only has it been cut down, that they've finished the automatic compensation, but I don't think it was a lot of money.
But she said she had myocarditis, pericarditis.
And POTS.
But what happens if she's, say, for example, infertile now or something?
They don't know.
You don't know until that plays out over time.
No. That brings me to the way they're testing these things. We need to be very aware of these mRNA vaccines that they're now giving. The latest RSV vaccine, which you might be noticing they're pushing, is an mRNA-based one, apparently.
So that's childhood vaccinations now.
All the childhood vaccines have had a new mix, and it's not a good one. Hep B, I listened to the most frightening and infuriating podcast between Russell Brand and a man called Aaron Siri. Aaron Siri is a man who's done a lot of court cases for vaccine injured or families who don't want to vaccinate their children. And he's done a couple of classic ones where Stanley Plotkin, who's the godfather of vaccines, the man's 93, and just before he meets his maker, he's decided to come clean and say, sorry, everyone, we never did real trials. We never did a placebo test. Everything was always tested against the previous mix, which probably killed a lot of babies anyway. So he decided that he was going to come clean. He was forced in court by Aaron Siri. And so that only came out fairly recently, that the admission that there'd been no full placebo trials for any vaccine, not just COVID. And
this is something that RFK Jr. has been talking about.
And another woman who's the sort of female version of the evil Stanley Plotkin, her name's Catherine Edwards. She actually said in court, you've badgered me into admitting that we've never done a trial about whether this vaccine causes autism. You've badgered me, as though she should have been protected. These people have no conscience. The Hep B vaccination we're currently giving to every newborn, and if you're at hospital having a baby, the midwife will make you feel like you're a baby murderer if you don't let the child have this Hep B vaccination. That has more aluminium in it than is recommended for a 200-pound man. And if you actually look at the insert of the box for Hep B for babies, you will find that millions of children have been vaccinated with something, and the trial for that was 147 babies, and the duration of the trial was 5 days.
Not to mention that I think the only way to catch Hep B is through sexual intercourse and drugs. So what baby is doing that? Well, you would hope that no baby's doing that.
Well, not when they're newborn.
Yeah.
And this drug was actually intended.
And the problem is, you might think, oh, well, it's just an easy decision to say no Hep B, it's not necessary. But they take that and they mix it with the other vaccines and they put it into the one shot.
Well, that's what happens with the DTP. That's the diphtheria, tetanus, and pertussis, which is why pertussis is a particular. Look, I'm not medical, but I've listened to enough people now to know. And Aaron Siri clarified in this conversation with Russell Brand, which only came out fairly recently, the pertussis vaccination, which they're currently pushing here, is a particularly nasty one. And unfortunately, one of my family was affected with that. Well, we're not sure which one it was, but in the film Vaxxed, the most shocking story, was put out by Del Bigtree and the Children's Health Defence, where they spoke to all these parents whose children were vaccinated. I defy anyone to watch this family without crying. They had the most gorgeous triplets, two little boys and a girl, and they were taken off for an 8 months wellness check. They took the children home, and one by one, the children closed down. And Aaron Siri describes how he talked to the father of these three beautiful little kids, and the father said to Aaron, the man who told us to vaccinate our babies is having a peaceful night's sleep every night. My wife and I are beside ourselves. Our children can't be toilet trained. They smear their feces everywhere. We are up all night. We're yelling at each other. Our children are really upset. They can't communicate with us. We can't imagine what their future is going to be. All we're trying to do is live in the now. I think his children must be 6 or 7 now. Can you imagine having 3 severely autistic children who were born normal, and they were holding hands and engaging with each other, and one by one, within hours, the lights went out. I mean, when I think about that, I want to cry. This is for the children. We have to stop it. The greatest con on humankind has been committed by Big Pharma, and if we keep quiet about it, we have the potential for every second little boy, by the year something like 2035, every second little boy could be autistic. If we don't stop this now, we are facing that kind of future. It must stop. And, as evidenced in the Port Hedland discussion council, the Aborigines, apparently their genetic makeup, they can't tolerate these things. And that's why 7 times as many of them are dying over in Port Hedland. But it also becomes clear when you watch the Vaxxed and Protocol 7, the films that Andrew Wakefield's been involved in, that little black baby boys are often the ones who tolerate these things the worst. It's just all so awful, and we cannot keep quiet. I won't ever. I mean, I'm just going to be such a thorn in everyone's side until I am not leaving this mortal coil until this stops.
How do you feel about Bobby Kennedy?
Hopeful.
Yep.
Mind you, if he doesn't stop the mRNA vaccinations, I will be very despondent. He's talking about food processing. He's talking about taking the fluoride out of water. He's doing a lot of talking, and that's all great. But if he doesn't stop the mRNA vaccinations, I will be very, very, very unhappy about that.
Before he even gets into that role, he's done. Do you feel he's done a lot of good already just by
absolutely.
speaking about these things?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And what is going to be very interesting is that what are we going to do with all those billions of dollars worth of mRNA factories we've built in Macquarie and down in Monash? I mean, these idiots, and also insultingly, Scott Morrison arranged that we can't question any of the things they're making. We just have to accept whatever comes out of those factories. We can't look at any alternative. Not that I'm interested in any alternative, but how dare he say, this is your lot, you're having that. I mean, it just is unbelievable. It
was an unbelievable time, and we're still paying the consequences for it. We're talking about people that have been hurt, but also the financial. Our economies. I don't know how we're ever going to pay off the debt, and a lot of it went to these vaccine companies.
Yep. Well,
paying for these. What did they buy? Enough doses to vaccinate every Australian 10 times, and
or more, I think.
Most that's gone to waste.
Yep.
Where's that money gone? It just goes.
And we never saw the contracts. Actually, no. Ursula von der Leyen is under the pump in Europe, apparently. There's this marvellous man, I think his name's Andrew Roos. He's the Dutch parliamentarian in the EU who confronted that woman from Pfizer and said, did you ever test transmission? And she foolishly said, no, we were working at the speed of science. That's gone down in history as the biggest mistake. But, she's under the pump because she's done some deal. I think her husband worked for Pfizer, so she's done some deal and made billions.
Yeah.
The whole thing is just so corrupt. We saw all that with My Lee. We saw just how they tried to diminish that wonderful woman.
I'm conscious of the time. I want to squeeze in a few more clips. Now, maybe tell us about this lady here, because she was also speaking outside Sophie Scamps' office. Who's this?
That's Shona Spinks, Brittany's mother.
Okay, let's hear from her.
I'm here with Shona, whose lovely daughter Brittany suffered a terrible vaccine injury. Shona, would you like to tell me what you think about the cardiologist and how it was affecting your daughter when she got her vaccine injury?
It's been a really long road. It's over 3 years now. The first cardiologist, I think, he actually hid test results that we found out after the fact, which probably made Brittany's condition even worse than what it needed to be. The second cardiologist has been amazing. We were lucky. We actually have 5 specialists that have acknowledged the direct link between the vaccine and Brittany's injury, which is great.
But it was very hard to get them to, wasn't it?
It was hard to get them to, and most of them acknowledged, there was a lot of knowing looks exchanged because they can't say a lot of things. But the tide's turning slightly. As far as people speaking out, I think that's going to be very difficult. But there's a lot of people. There's more and more young people presenting every day with these cardiac conditions, and people have to be starting to ask questions.
How do you think the landscape lies for the politicians who remain silent?
I think their days are numbered. Seriously, it's going to be dangerous for them if they don't start waking up and going, "What can we do to help?" Even if they go, "We didn't know back then." Do something now. Do something now. Where's the help?
Thank you so much for talking with me, Shona. She seriously believes they all know, and they're just covering up. I don't know what to say about that.
It's these people just living their lives, and they thought they were doing the right thing. They thought
the worst of it.
Yeah. They thought that they were given the line, we're all in this together, and you need to go get vaccinated to protect grandma. And they thought, okay, well, I'm going to do my civic duty and roll up my sleeve and get this done. And they're left behind to.
Yep, the consequences have been so bad. And one of the things that I find very upsetting is that they're not very angry. For some reason, they've taken on responsibility for themselves a bit, and they don't seem angry. I mean, I remember a young man I met at Freshwater, lovely young man.
I guess you can't be angry all the time. You can't live your life. I mean,
I don't know. He would have been about 23 or 4, great big strapping boy. He was with his mother, and he was going on the holiday of a lifetime, going overseas. It was after he'd studied, and he ended up full of blood clots in his lungs. And I said, "Are you angry?" He said, "No."
Do you think it's because they feel like they're on their own?
I think they
don't have
feel it's
support.
socially unacceptable to talk about it. They'll talk about it with me, but I imagine they don't like admitting that they were duped, and all their friends have taken the vaccine, and they don't want to frighten them.
Or do you think that they feel like, yes, there've been adverse reactions, I'm just one of the unlucky ones?
Or possibly. Possibly. Look, I find it really hard to
Because it is interesting, because you seem more angry than them.
Oh, I'm much more angry
and
than
you
anyone.
didn't take it.
No, I begged everyone not to. I ran around shouting from the rooftops, don't take this, don't take this, don't take this. I was warned, you see, I got the heads up, not that I'm smart, but as I mentioned, I got pericarditis and pneumonia from the flu jab in 2018, I think it was. And also this family member had a shocking incident. So I was pretty wary about vaccine by that time. And my husband and I were going on a trip to Africa by ship. My doctor prescribed me with HCQ. And I said to him, oh, look, I've been to places with malaria before. I'm not worried about it. He said, oh, no, you must have HCQ. You know, you don't want to get sick. So reluctantly, I got the script. And we left in the middle of March 2020. We went to Fremantle to get on the ship and literally had one foot on the gangplank. And we got the message saying that the trip's off. Back to Mona Vale, back to the doctor. By that time, Trump had mentioned HCQ, and I said to my GP, I'd like another script of it. And he said, oh, no, that's dangerous. I said, it wasn't dangerous 6 weeks ago. So I can't give it to you. There'll be repercussions. And I said, what repercussions? So he went quite wobbly, and I said to him, you're not telling me the truth. And he just looked down. He wouldn't look at me. Anyway, he's heard quite a lot from me since, as you can imagine.
Yeah, I had a similar experience. More, you could tell that they're not. I mean, they weren't telling the truth. I think a lot of the doctors knew about this stuff, but their careers were on the line, and they chose their careers.
I think so. Or in that case, and subsequently, I went into his waiting room, and one old lady walked in there. She said, "I've lost count of how many vaccinations I've had, but I think I might need another one." They said, "Oh well, we've got a gap."
I want to get to this clip. We played this on the podcast when this happened. Now, this was probably the first instance where you've had any issues from the council, correct? But
the only time, yeah.
The only time. Well, let's play the clip, and then I'll get your comments of what happened and what your thoughts were.
Moving to the side. Can you leave? This is public land. I have no idea what you're doing. No idea. So what I'm saying, you guys, under the Public Spaces Act, you're moving it and putting it to the side.
Who's paying you? We're paying you, pal. You know that. You're the taxpayer here. Huh? God. What are you trying to do? Hey.
Have you got a brain in your head?
Oh, he hasn't got any brain at all, this guy.
Hey, guys.
So, did you find out who this was? Was it a ranger?
Oh, yeah, he was a ranger. Look, it didn't worry me. I just put them back.
Yeah. Did he try and fine you or anything like that?
Well,
I mean, it's not a good look.
No, I think his ego had been bruised because a friend who was there helping had a dog off the leash, and he very officiously came over and said, "Your dog's off the leash, I'm fining you." And my friend just put the leash on the dog and said, "How do you know it was off the leash?" And he got all hot and bothered about that. My friends who were with me that day think that he had written out the little yellow notice that was on one of the flags there saying you couldn't have this on the beach. But I just didn't take any notice.
But why? Why? I mean, you're not hurting anyone. It's a silent silent display. It's not even a protest. It's just some information. I mean,
I just didn't take any notice.
But I don't see what the issue is. What is?
Well, he said it was abandoned property on the beach.
Abandoned property.
That's only applicable if you've had 2 or 3 days' notice. I just thought this guy's had his testosterone overload, and he's just all upset because we made him look like an idiot. He wandered down to the Surf Lifesaving Club to try and gather some support, and the person he spoke to was someone I'd actually spoken to earlier in the day, and he said, "No, I'm with her. She's right." So it all came to nothing. People said, "Oh, you should take it further." I don't think it does the forest of the fallen any good to get contentious and litigious.
Yeah, but I think this is beyond Forest of the Fallen. This is a real issue that we're facing in this country now, where we have these councils that just think that they have, you know, this unlimited power to be able to go up to people and say, you can't do this and you're going to get a fine for that, and it's just completely eroding our freedoms.
He paid the price. That was my video. I think it had something like 140,000 views on Twitter.
Wow. And you went to council and spoke on this
Yes.
matter, right? So how did that go?
I went, it was on the 14th of November at the council meeting, and I went and spoke. Actually, it was really good that so many people came and supported me, and they all carried the flags from the forest, which made an impact. Well, I was allowed 3 minutes, and I'd taken some advice from someone who was marvelous and helpful. It made my speech just a tad over 3 minutes, and they wouldn't let me finish it. So the last last paragraph of my speech was saying, I'm hoping and expecting to hear that you're going to notify all the people who are administering these vaccines about their issue of liability, and that you should warn them and take into account the fact that so many are being injured. So I wasn't able to say that in the council recording, which I felt really bad about. But then I subsequently sent the full speech to every council member. So they're all fully aware, but not one of them's written back. And then just the other day, a week or so ago, we're being our rates are being increased by 46%. And there was a meeting at which the CEO magnanimously showed his face. And I went up to him and I said, I spoke at the council last week and no one's responded. And the vaccine injured aren't being helped. And he just quite smugly and rudely said, I'm not talking about vaccines with you. Anyway, I did a little video of him and put that online too.
Yes, if you want to, I mean, we've played a few of Rosie's clips today, but I guess the best place to go is her Facebook page.
I am on Twitter. I'm a bit hit and miss with that, but
yes, you're also on Twitter as well.
Yeah.
So you've got a very unique Twitter name on. Let me just try and find it.
It's something like Rosie M127 something.
Yeah, Rosie M with a whole bunch of numbers.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not. Social media is not my strong point. Really.
We're going to have to. We have to get behind your social media and because people want to hear from you. It's interesting. I know you're baffled by it, but people love to hear your stories and what you're up to. So this is Rosie's X page. It's Rosie M 1276203.
Oh, I'm a star. How many followers have I got now?
You've got over 2,600. So.
Well, I started with about 3, so that's interesting.
Yes, and Facebook, I think you're over 15,000. I think I saw.
Oh no! Oops. No, I think I've got about 900 followers and 1,500 friends, many of whom would prefer not to look at what I put up there, I suspect.
Yeah. Okay.
But,
also, if you haven't heard anything about Forest of the Fallen before, you can head to their website, forestofthefallen.com. and learn more about what Forest of the Fallen is doing and what they hope to achieve. We spoke a lot about that in the previous discussion that we had with Rosie, so also go back and check that one out as well. If people want to have Forest of the Fallens in their area and do it themselves and volunteer in that way, is the website the best place to go?
Yes, you approach the website and say you want to get a kit. You're sent the PDF for free, which you need to update, but the cost aligned with it is getting the bamboo stakes and the laminating of the pages. We did double side because I can't fit so many stories in the car. So, and I think we've got something like 370 flags.
Wow.
So there's a lot of stories there. But I can't recommend it enough, especially when you're feeling helpless or if you've got a family member who's been hurt and you really want to do something constructive. You will find tremendous comfort because people who come and help you will not only be very sympathetic, but they'll be like-minded. And I can't stress enough how important it is that we're with like-minded people. You'd go mad if you weren't.
Yes, yeah. So where to from here? I mean, last time I spoke to you, it felt like you were doing enough, and then you've just picked up steam ever since. You've been everywhere. You've been on podcasts that were in the UK. I mean, you've almost gone global in,
I don't know about that.
in a way.
Look, I've got no ambition. This isn't about me. I keep saying to people, look, I'm a housewife from Church Point. I hardly know what's hit me, but I simply cannot be quiet. As I said before, I am not leaving until this stops. I've got 6 grandchildren and my sons and my stepdaughters and their children. I just find it unbearable that this problem will be foisted onto them if we don't do something. I can't bear the thought. So I'm going to be a real pain in the neck for all these people until that stops.
Good. I like to hear that. Well, thank you, Rosie. Thank you for everything that you're doing. You're amazing, and you're a true testament to humanity, I think. But
Angry grandmother. Don't upset grandmothers. Sorry, it doesn't end well when you upset grandmothers. Seriously doesn't. Yes,
definitely. Now, I know the last time that we had Rosie on, it was shared far and wide. So thank you to the audience for doing that. Hopefully you'll do it again, because the more that people can hear from you, Rosie, I think the better, because you have a way of being able to articulate the message in a way that's a little bit unique, and it probably helps that you're a grandmother just speaking honestly and from the heart. So please, audience, share it far and wide. Keep up to date with everything we're doing at commandthenarrative.com. As I said, go to the website, hit the sign up button, follow Rosie on all her social media, Facebook and X, and also head to the Forest of the Fallen website. But thank you all for watching today's episode, and we'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you.